All right, three, two, one. All right, thank you, sir. I'm here with Joe Logan. He's a retired Major General. Used to work for the Department of Defense for Hawaii, right? It was Hawaii's DOD.
Yeah, the director of the State Department of Defense.
Oh, okay. Because your resume is quite impressive and long, so it's kind of
I appreciate that.
I just want to say thank you for taking the time to come and be a guest. I was actually surprised because I never really care or think much about LinkedIn. I mean, I don't know if anyone has ever connected on LinkedIn.
Well, quite a few times. I had no expectation about LinkedIn, but when I joined and I signed up, it was actually, I've got more connections and made new friends through LinkedIn than I would have never had before.
Really?
So,
Yeah, that's interesting because you had congratulated me on a work anniversary, and I was like, you know what? Let me just shoot my shot and see if he'd be interested in just coming and sharing his story, because I've always known about you,
right.
Ever since I worked at the Capitol, and of course TV and everything. So I thought it would be interesting to hear your story. So why don't you just go ahead and you can just kind of give a little brief breakdown where you're from, what got you to where you are today. Does it? And then we'll kind of get into everything in a minute.
Sure, okay. Well, I was not born in Hawaii, but I was raised here. I'm originally born in Omaha, Nebraska, and my mom married an active duty Army officer, and so every 3 or 4 years we traveled around the United States mostly. And then after my dad's second tour in Vietnam, he came back to the Pentagon, and we were living in Virginia at the time, and got assigned out to Hawaii to Fort Shafter.
Nice.
And interesting that my dad's an Army officer, Ranger, boots on the ground, combat guy, but he was an information technology specialist. He had a master's degree in computer science, and that's where he met my mom in Nebraska. And so here you have it's a dichotomy of experiences. You're a combat person on certain times of your career, and then you're in the office running computers is another part of your career, which I thought was rather interesting for my dad.
Yeah.
But that's how we moved here in 1972, came to Hawaii, went to public school, finished up 7th grade at Washington Intermediate. Then we moved to the windward side in Kaneohe. I went to King Intermediate for 8th and 9th grade. Saw an ad in the paper about a St. Louis high school. I had no concept of what it was. I applied, took the test, and got accepted. And my parents, back then it was much more reasonable, I guess. But like anything else, in 1975, what my dad was making and what the school cost was significant. But he was able to afford that with mom going to work. And so they paid for my private school at St. Louis graduated in 1977. And that's pretty much the basics of my start here. And then I actually started working when I was 15, making corn tortillas in the back of an old Mexican shutdown. The restaurant shut down, but it was a Mexican restaurant. So never ask your mom to find you a job, because that's dangerous. And so then I joined the Army in 1979, my first year out of UH, studying architecture and engineering. So that summer I went to basic training, came home for a year. Finished up my second year at University of Hawaii, went back to AIT at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, to be a draftsman for an engineering battalion in the U.S. Army Reserve here in Hawaii. And so that was my start in the military. And then I had different jobs in between, so I basically found new jobs every time I came home. And then from there, I just that was the start of my military career. After
Nice.
41 years of service is where I am today. So.
Oh yeah, 41. That's impressive, especially compared to my 8. But so I guess your first. So what was your first major job, or I guess permanent gig, was with HPD?
Yeah. So my first career position, I guess, or
Yeah,
what started a career in law enforcement. I professionalized. I was a cook in restaurants, worked for a hardware store, but those aren't technically professions I mean, you can be a professional cook and a chef and those kinds of things, but that wasn't my dream, nor was being a policeman really. One day my brother came home. I was working for an engineering company, and I was drafting for them in Fort Street Mall. And so my brother brought home, my older brother went to police academy, graduated, was also in the Hawaii National Guard at the time. And he brought the application, said, you need to try this, come join the police department. And so I thought about it for a couple of weeks and said, all right, I filled out the application. I left it on my dresser, went to work that night, came back late at night from the restaurant that I was working in, and my dog had chewed up my application, and it was due the next day. And so I had to run down to the city and county human resources office, refill out everything all over again.
Oh, wow.
And then submitted it by 4:00 that afternoon. And so I got it in time, took the test, and I passed the test. They called me up for you had to do a physical exam, you had to take an interview and do a psychological test. So I did all of those things, passed everything. And then in June of 1972 or 1982 is when I started. I got the June 17th, was a Thursday evening, called us all into this meeting. There was 55 of us, I think, in the class. And we all sat in the old police station, which was the old Sears building on South Beretania Street and Young Street. And from that, we started our police career. And we went through 9 months of recruit school. And enjoyable time. It was fun. They paid me twice as much money as I was making for the engineering company to go to
wow.
recruit school. And the funny thing was, by that time I had switched to the Army National Guard. Mm-hmm. And so when I made that switch in 1980, here I am taking the recruit school, was in the upstairs classroom of the brigade headquarters on 22nd Avenue in Diamond Head. And so I'm drilling on weekends in the same place on Monday through Friday, going to recruit school. Yeah. So, and later on, when I left the police department to take a full-time job in 2000, is the building we used to have the formations in when the chief would come down and do the inspection for the recruit class, is the very building I'm now in control of and in charge of.
Oh, wow.
An organization. So it's kind of like full circle.
Yeah, interesting.
A lot of interesting crossovers that happen as these things do. But so I did 20 years in the Honolulu Police Department, resigned in 2002 to become full-time in the Hawaii National Guard.
And what was the role then that you were taking on for the National Guard?
I was a senior major, and I took on the counter-drug program, which was something that started in the early 90s. Each state and territory had a counter-drug program where they provided, because Title 10 Posse Comitatus applies, right? So active duty military cannot do law enforcement, but National Guard can because they're under Title 32. So it's a different law under United States Code. So because of that different law, Posse Comitatus doesn't apply to us. Therefore, we can do law enforcement work.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And we don't try to be we're not policemen, but we support law enforcement agencies, and we can be intel analysts. You can do observation and surveillance. You can recon and do other things in support of the police department to help them gather evidence. But we try not to. We don't make arrests. We don't, and we don't gather evidence. So we want to stay out of the chain of custody of evidence, and that kind of thing. Not that we wouldn't be able to support it, but it's just not something you want guardsmen to do. Yeah. You still want to keep that military construct, like the Title 10, intact.
That's interesting, because I was reserve and active duty military police, but I didn't.
Right.
I guess reserve doesn't fall under the same as the National Guard, so.
Right. You're still Title 10 in the Army Reserve.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I didn't know a lot of things when I joined as a young private. And one of the things at basic training is, because we were from Hawaii, there was 5 of us in the same basic training unit in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri.
That's where I went.
Yeah. It's hot in the summer. I couldn't wait to cut my hair because I had super long hair back then from spending a lot of times at Sandy Beach and getting nice and tan and blonde
Yeah.
hair. But I needed a cut, and then my ears got sunburned, and it was pretty funny by the time I got out of basic training. But so one of the brand new drill sergeants showed up late. He was at home, and then he called the 5 Hawaii guys into his office as soon as he got there. It's like, you 5, get in my office. And we all at parade rest, and he just called us pineapples after that. That's all he used.
Pineapples.
You guys are pineapples. I don't want you any trouble out of you. I know it. Hawaii guys, you come here. You guys, I don't know what you do, but you get into trouble. And can you not do that? And
Oh, wow.
we're just looking at each other. And I only knew one of the 5 guys from Hawaii. The other 3, I didn't even, I got to know them by the time we left, but it was just like, why are you picking on us?
Yeah.
And so I don't know what Hawaii people did in basic training. But we didn't cause any trouble.
That's interesting. Well, you got to cause a little trouble in basic, I think. But what months were you in Fort Leonard Wood then?
I was there from late June till end of August.
Oh, yeah, it's
I
almost.
think, early June, early July to late August. Yeah, as soon as I came home, I jumped right back into school. And then, so AIT for me, a lot of people go straight into AIT, right, from basic training. So I took a year off, went back to school, drilled. I drilled with the 411th Engineer Battalion at Fort DeRussy, really not knowing what I was doing as a young private, who does. And then I came back, went to AIT, drafting school, right? So we had the surveyors downstairs, the draftsmen were the upper barracks, and then the females were on the top. And they were in our classes, so it was kind of a mix of male and female classes. And we were at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, and I had been there as a young kid when my dad was stationed in
that's
the
right.
Pentagon. And so now I'm back as a private, which was interesting, or at least a PFC, I think, or E2. And the captain, who's the company commander for the training unit that we were, selected me to be the class leader. So now I'm a young private. I don't know anybody from Adam. There's all these people from all over the United States thrown together. There's probably about 25, 30 of us. And I'm now the class leader. And I'm like, oh, okay.
That's the first, for like most people, basic training or any military initial training is the first time that a lot of people meet anyone from
Right.
any other, even culture.
Absolutely.
I mean, I've never known anyone who was from like Mexico, Puerto Rico, and I love those guys. But it's interesting. It's like it's its own little melting pot, and then you learn how to get along with everybody.
Right.
Like you just learn how to deal with everyone's personalities and different ways of doing things.
Right, because you're all there for the same reason. You're there to
Right.
get trained. You're there to serve your country. You're there for all the right reasons. And so it's easy to mingle with those kinds of people and basically get to know each other. No
Yeah.
one's there for their ego or anything else.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Like everyone's there for some sort of reason that is at least bettering themselves. Yeah, interesting. So you came back from Leonard Wood. So wait, as a draftsman, I feel like wouldn't that be like wouldn't you need like it was like an enlisted, like a private?
Yeah, I was enlisted back then. So I joined as a private.
Because when I think of draftsmen, I'm thinking of people who are like designing the.
Well, draftsmen draw the pictures that the engineers and architects put together. So I make the plans that they design the concept. So if they designed a building, and they design what the end result would look like, and then the draftsman would take that and go, okay, with the engineers, sit down and go, okay, each section looks like this. So floor 1, floor 2, basement. What does the wall look like? How's the foundation laid? What's the ground underneath? Where's the rebar sitting? And so we draw those all into pictures. So when the construction people go, they're the ones that take the plans
Yeah.
and actually make the building.
That's impressive. I just feel like that would be like some like you would need more of an advanced degree to do something like that.
Well, you're not. So later in life, when I became a combat engineer commander, then I had to. That's when all your algebra, math, and science comes to play, where you've got to understand steel strength, concrete pressure,
Oh, I
pounds
see.
per square inch, dynamite, what's it going to do, how's it big the blast is going to be. And so those are when the sciences all come into play. But for the enlisted side, more so it's just execution of a small amount of information. You didn't need to be a college degree person to be a draftsman.
I see. Cool.
And today it's all computer generated. So you type it on the computer, click a couple things on the mouse, and it pops up. And so it's a lot, I won't say simpler, it's a little more advanced technology.
Yeah, okay, I get it. And then you eventually became an officer.
Yes.
What led to that?
So one day I was in the arms room. So as a young enlisted person in a unit, I did all the preventive maintenance checks for all the vehicles that were assigned to our section, which was 3. And then I was a Jeep, a truck, and a larger truck. And then I did all the weapons. So I took care of the heavy weapons sections. So I made sure all the M60 machine guns, the other weapons that were assigned to us were clean, ready to go. And I walked into the arms room to check out the M60 to make sure it was clean, because we had fired it a couple drills ago, and we had cleaned it, but I wanted to clean it one more time just to make sure it's always there, and you got to grease it and oil it and stuff. And so I walked by this room, and these 2 officers were working on a 60 cal, and they forgot that it was cocked. And when you release the back sleeve and take off the butt plate and lift up the stopper, that spring comes flying out. And it just so happened that I was slightly delayed, and that it went flying right in front of me into the wall and put a big dent in the concrete wall. Ooh. And I was like, okay. So, and my dad was a lieutenant colonel in the Army, retired by then. And I was like, all right, if they could do that, and I'm I came back as a class leader, and I'm going to college. I'm just as smart as they are.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So I can be an officer too. and that's, it's oversimplify it, but that's kind of, I never felt that I was less than they were. Mm-hmm. I always felt that I can do that job too. I'm just as smart as they are.
Yeah.
Even though they were officers and I was enlisted. And nothing against enlisted. I mean, we need enlisted people in the organization. And we need officers. And we'd like to get officers. Well, so there's 2 kinds. There's officers that come out of college, either ROTC and or West Point or schools. And sometimes you don't get the full, I would say, feeling or what it's like to be in the military unless you've been on the bottom.
Yeah.
And so that makes you a really good leader. Not that anybody come out of West Point doesn't, because in West Point, those 4 years you're a plebe, you go through experiences that the rest of us don't. Mm-hmm. And so you're treated in a manner that makes you understand what it's like to be at the bottom. And so those of us that were enlisted have a great feeling on what it's like to be at the bottom, because that's where we start. But I, like any organization, bought into if you're going to work at a company, like a McDonald's or a large insurance company or business downtown, you start in the mailroom or in the fry room, and you work your way up. And so I always bought into that mantra. And so I thought that same thing in the enlisted part. I just jumped a few ranks, but when I was in E4, I went to OCS, became a second lieutenant, and that's what started my officer career.
Yeah, and those were always the best, or I felt, the best officers were the ones who went like green to gold or through the OCS, because they kind of understand the plight of the private and what that job actually entails. It's kind of like if you have a sergeant or a squad leader who's never deployed, which was very rough for a lot of people. When I was getting out, was 2009 off active duty. We had people who had never deployed that were sergeants.
Right.
There were E4s below them that had deployed and things like this. That's got to be hard, because you don't have that experience. You only have like what the book says. Right. And that's why lieutenants get ragged on, right? Because it's just they only know what that book says. Right. They don't understand the abstract part of it. Yeah. And then so you become a second lieutenant, and then where does that take you?
So I started as a rifle platoon leader on the island of Kauai, which is Bravo Company, 1st Battalion, 299 Infantry, when it existed here in the state of Hawaii, part of the 29th Brigade of the Hawaii Army National Guard. And so that was the start of my career. And the one thing they taught me as an officer is you learn from your NCO, your first sergeant, your platoon sergeant rather. That's the person that's going to teach you how to do your job. and said, don't run in there and try to be Mr. Macho, I know everything, ego kind of guy.
Salute me.
You learn from your NCOs, your squad leaders, and your platoon sergeant are the ones going to teach you. And sure enough, it absolutely true. So I spent, I think, almost 6 months on Kauai as a platoon leader, and then I went off to officer basic course infantry at Fort Benning, and so that took me away for 3 months, and so when I came back from my basic course as an infantry officer, then they moved me to Maui, to Charlie Company on Maui. So then I became a platoon leader on Maui, and then I went from platoon leader to rifle platoon leader to mortar platoon, and then I had to go back to Fort Benning for another class for the infantry officer mortar platoon course. And so those are all the training things you have to go to, right? And then I learned how to be an indirect fire person for 60s, 81s, and 4-deuce mortars that were in the inventory of the U.S. Army back then. And then what that caused me to do, which I didn't understand at the time, but now I do, is I now ran all the ranges on Oahu every time a unit came from Neighbor Island to shoot indirect fire, because I was an indirect fire trained person, and so I could open up and close the range and be their range safety officer for all of them while they did what they needed to do.
Is that kind of like, would you get like TDY in a sense? Because
Well, I was here on Oahu, so I lived here.
but
yeah.
you weren't. Was your spot like full time, or it would just be
No,
during the
it was a
drill
part-time.
weekend?
Yeah, it was a drill weekend.
Oh, I
So
see.
1 weekend a month. Yeah, so when I joined the Army Reserve and even switched over to the National Guard, it was 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks every summer. That's what they told us. And once I became an officer, that drastically changed.
Yeah.
More to still 1 weekend a month training, but then we're going to add in some exercises in between. So it'll be, besides your 2-week annual training, you might do 3 weeks in Korea. You might do 2 weeks in Fort Lewis, Washington, doing a training exercise. I was like, oh, okay. And thank God I work for the police department, because within the laws written and the Human Resources Office rules, that I could take leave without pay, or I could take leave if I had. And as long as I had an order that said you're ordered to active duty by the governor to go to this training, they couldn't say no. But you don't want to be mean about it either. I didn't disappear for years at a time. I did later on in life, but not early on. And so a young lieutenant, you're doing 3-4 weeks, and it's difficult to have, not impossible, but it's difficult with your family trying to do the 1 weekend a month, because you're missing things that the kids would have on the weekends. And then you're gone 2-3 weeks at a time, maybe 2 or 3 times a year. And so you're going to miss an event, because you don't get to choose when those 3 weeks are.
Yeah.
Someone's choose them for you.
Yeah.
And it may happen to be, a significant birthday, or somebody's graduating, or something's going on. And, you're getting pulled between 2 different places.
That's kind of one of the reasons why, when I was originally, reserves, did like 3 years, and then I said, you know what? One, I wanted to get out of Pittsburgh, because I was working construction, and it wasn't what I wanted to do, right? It wasn't my passion. And then just always having to schedule kind of my life around the military. So I said, okay, I just go active duty, and I just get it out the way, right? And then, I went active duty, and then back and finished out my last year in the reserves, which was awesome, because my squad leader from active duty had gone to OCS.
Right.
Actually, and then by the time that I joined the reserves here, he was in charge of the only military police platoon for the reserves.
Right.
So he was in charge of it. So it was awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just did a year there, and then closed out my 8 years, so they can't call me back, hopefully.
Oh, you're still on a list somewhere.
Yeah.
Aren't we all?
And then, so you became the counter-drug coordinator for the Hawaii National Guard.
Right. That was full-time AGR. So I basically left the police department in 2000. I actually resigned in 2002. And based on rules and laws, you could stay out 5 years from the police department back then. on as long as you're on an active duty order, and then you either come back or you got to resign. And so I was coming up on my 5 years. I had to make a decision. I asked the leadership in the Guard, "Can I stay long enough to retire? Are you going to keep me around long enough, or am I doing a good job, or am I not?" Basically was the question. And they said, "No, we want you to stay with us, if you will, and we'll get you to retirement." I said, "Okay."
Well, that's awesome. Although that's still always a scary predicament.
It is.
Because if the state needs to save some money, right, they start cutting people, yeah?
Yeah, so prior to that, there was a GS-10 job that opened as an operations officer for another unit in the Guard, and they wanted me to do that. And I said, "Yeah, but I only have 8 years in the state or the city. And if I leave at 8 years, I'm not vested. I need 10 years to get vested so that at age 55, I could collect a retirement." Right?
Yeah.
So there's always a money component around to something, although that's not the main driver of decisions, but it's got a big deal to it.
Oh, yeah.
And so I told him, "Well, I can't take that job now. If you could put me on active duty or ADOS or ADSW, what they call it, active duty special work, for 2 years, then absolutely, because I could earn those 2 years on leave from the department." And they said no, and so I said okay. So I kept applying for other AGR positions, and this one finally landed in my lap.
That's awesome. When I found out about AGR, it was too late, but I was like, man, that's like the hidden gem of the reserves and Guard. I said, what? You can be reserve? Like, I can go home every day, but I'm just going to a unit here and getting paid? Oh, that's like...
Yeah, you get active duty pay, COLA, BAH, BAS, everything that the normal active duty soldier would get. It's just you never have to leave.
Because there was a couple slots back home in Pittsburgh when I was in the reserves. It was the 307th MP company out of New Kensington, and I loved those people. But there was a couple guys who had went AGR, and their whole job was with the state police. They would go pick up AWOLs. I was like, what? I was like, that's incredible. I was like, that's awesome. Like, I would love to do that. But I ended up going active. And then, so I would like to know more about your time in Afghanistan, because I think that's interesting. You were in charge of you were in the Police Advisory Command?
Yes. So there were 5 in Afghanistan at the time, just created, brand new, in 2007. They actually started late 2006, early 2007. I mobilized in May of 2007 from Hawaii, got into, where did we go to? Camp Shelby, Mississippi, and then did 1 month of training there, and then got into country through Kuwait. I couldn't wait to get out of Kuwait. It was so hot.
That's not the place to be.
Just get me on a plane, get me out. I'd rather be in the war than sitting in Kuwait.
Yeah.
And then, so that was my job. And because they created this brand new position, they needed 6 colonels to come over to be commanders. And some were active duty, but most were guardsmen. And there was 1 female with us, and then 2 of us. One was a prosecutor from West Virginia, and myself. And the 3 of us became pretty close because we all showed up at Camp Shelby at the same time, got trained up and off. And so I had spent almost 30 years of my career as a part-time, full-time soldier with never deploying. We couldn't go to Desert Storm because our brigade wasn't called. I volunteered as an engineer officer, but my general at the time said no, because if we go, I want you with me. I don't want you coming home when we're going up. And I said, okay, that makes sense. So I had to wait. And like my dad was in Vietnam, he was in Korea, he was in World War II. And so he had been all these places, and we listened to all his stories. And here he's got 3 sons, all in the Guard, all officers, and none of us have deployed.
Yeah, that's always...
Yeah, and so I always felt, not that being colonel was a nice thing to do, it was a great opportunity and a fantastic career getting that far, and all the people that helped me get there, because you can't do it by yourself. But I just didn't feel fulfilled until I deployed. And then, so they called me one day to we have an engineer construction person I need, somebody to come up to Iraq and help us with all these contracts and all this kind of stuff. And I said, well, hang on. I'm a combat engineer. I know blow stuff up. I know how to get the infantry moving, but I've never built stuff. Let me just...
Yeah, he's the opposite.
I learned that at engineer advanced course, but I've never put it into practice. And so, and I became a policeman, and I have a degree in criminal justice, not in engineering and architecture. So I said, well, I'm not really the person you want, but if you need me, if you can help me, if I, put the right people with me, that's fine. And they called me back and said, no, we might have something else for you. And so a couple months went by, and then I get notified from our mobilization officer that, hey, they're looking for law enforcement commanders to come over, people with law enforcement experience. And I said, well, perfect.
Yeah, that's perfect.
I just left the department. I run the counter-drug program. I still connected with local law enforcement. I'm there. And so I got up there, and that was my job. I commanded a group of 200 armed soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marine, active guard and reserve. And we basically helped train the Afghan National Police for the central region, which is in and around the provinces in and around Kabul, all the way out to the Pakistan border. 10 provinces, 110, cities.
Wow.
And counties, and so 110 districts, and then 10 provinces or 10 states. And so large group, 22,000 officers in the ANP, the Afghan National Police. So the two-star that was the police commander for the region had his hands full. Mm-hmm. Plus he had border police, plus he had Kabul police. And so we had all of that at first. And then they separated Kabul a couple months later and moved the city police under another colonel. But that's my start to command time. And, oh, by the way, when you get there, there is no, you're going to be running a command, so you got to put up there's no building, there's no staff.
There's nothing.
There's nothing except another colonel who I'm relieving, and he's going back home. And he's like, Joe, here's the vehicle, here's your cell phone, have at it. So, yeah, I quickly found some Air Force people that were assigned to me who were logisticians and IT, and with that, and some Army National Guard guys who were very good at property book stuff, put together everything. We accounted for all the equipment, all the vehicles, all the radios. And oh, by the way, I had to call in these teams that were, 3-hour drive away.
Wow.
In other states, and they had to cut through enemy lines and friendly lines to get to us. And so, in the asymmetric warfare of Afghanistan, but we made it all happen, and it was a challenge, but it was so rewarding.
And I'm looking at your resume, and it's so they're equivalent of a 2-star national police chief.
Right. So there's 5 regions, mm-hmm. right? There's north, south, east, west, and central. So the northern Afghanistan, out west, Herat, next to Iran. Then you had the one down south where the Taliban was still running around a lot of places. And then you had, they called it east, which was more toward the Pakistan border, just south of Kabul. And then you had the central region. So there are 5 either 1 or 2-star generals. And their police rank and military is identical.
All the same.
And so, and many of the general I was a mentor for, he was younger than me, been fighting much longer than I've ever been fighting. And so who's mentoring whom really is the question. But be that as may, my team was there to help his leadership command team understand, logistics and personnel and all that kind of stuff. And he was a young police chief at the district and level when the Russians were there, 10 years before we had gotten there. And so he had been trained by the Russians in policing and some other forms of military. And he would switch back between the Army and the police department. So he was in the Army as a general, he was in the police as a general. So he kind of flip-flopped back and forth, but super guy. He was very passionate about national the nationalism of Afghanistan. Not so much being a Tajik or a Hazar or Pashtun. It was more about being an Afghan.
Yeah.
And that's what we were helping the Afghans try to understand, because I worked with all those different nationalities that made up Afghanistan, or tribes, but they were so tribal, and it almost seems that the U.S. is trying to head back in that direction. It's like we're Americans first, and then we're everything else after that.
Right.
So I'm German, Irish, Scottish, British, Czechoslovakian, but I'm an American. So that's, I might be all those things, but that's not who I am.
Yeah, so, and because if you can get a country like pretty much anywhere in the Middle East and have them just unify around, hey, you are a national of Iraq, Afghanistan, wherever, that gives them something all to just bond and rally around.
Right. Not to change their minds about their tribe, but just
right.
to add another dynamic to their tribe and say, yeah, you're Pashtuns, yes, absolutely, you guys stay together, or you're Tajiks or Hazars, but you're Afghans, and nobody could ever take that away from you. And so if you believe in your country as Afghanistan, then you'll fight for that vice. Well, my family lives in the borderline that somebody created between Pakistan and Afghanistan that wasn't there when, my grandfather's grandfather was in there. And so because the British or whoever drew that line, and not to say it didn't belong there or doesn't, but that's where the line was drawn. And so now you have families that live on both sides or live in different countries, but they just have to take a step across.
Yeah. And
there they are. And then how do you close that border off? And how do you tell those families, you guys can't deal with each other because this is a border, you can't cross.
Yeah.
Right? And so those are the dynamics that politicians need to deal with, that diplomats and all leadership in countries need to understand and deal with, that's actually on the ground. But hey, those things matter, and they matter to these people. And if we get everybody on the same sheet of music, then if they buy into all that, then they buy into their country. And whether you're Taliban or not, you could still be Taliban and still be an Afghani.
Of course.
Right? And now but you have this area, and that's yours, and you command and control and do what you want there, but let everyone else live the way they want. But everybody's about power, I guess.
Yeah. Well, that's why I liked when I was in Iraq was under General Petraeus, and his approach of just being like, hey, we got to be on the ground, we got to be in the communities, we got to be talking to people. Yep. That's what we have to do. Like that to me, I was like, how come that wasn't a thing before? Like what? I don't make those decisions, but I just felt like that. Like I just feel like even when you go back to like your time as an HPD, and even kind of like what they're trying to talk about now is like community policing, right? You got to be in the community to get everyone rallied to support you and to support each other. And I love watching documentaries about General Petraeus. And I used to go sit in on different briefings because I was personal security for the commanding general of Task Force 134, so detainee operations.
Okay.
So we would constantly meet with diplomats and things in Iraq. Like we got to eat at the presidential palace and things. I used to love that. But just the approach was always very hands-on with people with General Petraeus. And I always admired that. And
the Army as a whole, and even the United States military complex, had to switch from fighting a war against, say, Russia in the Fulda Gap of Germany, which was a heavy maneuver forces, large swaths of land, bombers and jet fighters, and that wasn't Afghanistan. You couldn't do that. And so you had to in Afghanistan and Iraq really were coin operations, right? They're small wars that need a whole different framework. And so I think the Army wasn't prepared for the shift, and they started working it in the early 2000s, and it took several years for all the units, the military units, to catch up. And so you had to get out of that, that full World War construct of massive build-up with, hundreds of thousands of forces and corps and divisions and then you're doing small arms combat, and given terrain that, oh, by the way, you don't own. You might be the battle space commander, but you don't own that ground.
Yeah.
An Iraqi or Afghani, governor, mayor, they own the ground. They're the ones that are going to be here when we're gone.
Yeah.
And so,
that's interesting.
and how do you influence that, and how do you play into that in the community policing kind of thing? And so, that was the big thing. Is me as just a mentor and a commander of a small unit. My mantra to all my teams were: get with your governors, get with your mayors, get out to the shuras, make sure you're in meetings, make sure they see you. And don't always go there up armored stuff. If you can go with your police counterparts in, something less than, M4s, flak vests, and helmets. And that's the way I travel. I travel in pretty much my soft cap with a 9mm strap to me, without my armored vest, because I traveled with a 2-star general, not because I felt safe, but because I wanted the public to know, the Afghanis to know, look, I trust the people I'm with. That's why I dress down. And so now not everybody could do that, because there were orders that were out there but my general told me that, hey, you're an 06, you make decisions, you're representing us with them, however you feel comfortable. And I was perfectly comfortable walking around.
Yeah, and that makes sense, because you kind of, it's not that you're letting your guard down, but you're showing people like, hey, I'm not,
right.
I trust you, so I don't have to come around with all this gear and things on. I know that you got my back, hopefully.
Well, and back then they didn't have the blue on blue or blue on green killing that they had later on.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that too.
Yeah.
But.
So it didn't happen while I was there. It happened years or two later, and I think a lot of that. Well, one, the Taliban or other nations that sent people in there infiltrated the military and the police.
Oh, yeah.
And were basically there to kill Americans, as many as they could, anytime they could. But there was also a piece where we as soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, need to treat everybody with dignity and respect. I don't care what side of the fence you're on. Mm-hmm. So, like me, I sat with my general, and Taliban were, 6 feet across the hall from me, or the office from me, sitting on a couch. We're both staring at each other. And I know who they are. They know who I am. But I was there as a guest of the general, as the police commander, and the Taliban were there as a guest of the police chief to have a chat. Now, I don't know what they were saying, but the police chief looked at me and said, these are my guests. I said, yes, I got it. And so my team was like, we got to arrest them. I said, no, we're not doing anything, because the chief had asked me, these are his guests. Yeah. Now, once they leave the wire and they go do something, absolutely, time has, that friendship, or not friendship, but that respect given to them while they were there only lasted while they were there. Once they left the wire, then we could do something. And so, but I gave him my promise that we wouldn't do anything while they were there talking. So,
yeah, and that's cool. That would destroy their trust if you did something there, and then we'd just be screwed. Yeah, it's interesting. I love the dynamic of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, because, like you were saying, that you can't just go in with all this heavy equipment dropping bombs, right? Because that's somebody else's property.
Right.
And I think that's something that even I haven't considered in the past. Like, we're not necessarily there to annihilate everything. Right. We're just trying to, kind of rid the enemy out of their communities so they can understand what living semi-free, at least, really feels like, and then they can, hopefully manifest their own destiny in a sense. So, yeah, that's a new way. I never thought about it like you put it.
Well, and the person who coined doctrine, counterinsurgency operations, basically said you cannot kill everyone in an insurgency. It's just not going to happen, because people will blend into the surrounding environment and you won't know who they are. And you don't want to. It's about winning hearts and minds. It's not about killing everybody. And so there's no reason to annihilate everybody. Mm-hmm. But you have to, I guess, significantly attrit the other side so that their will to continue ceases. And so that they capitulate at that point in time and said, okay, let's figure out how to get this work together. I mean, we didn't go in and obliterate Japan, right, or Germany. we kept as much intact as we could, but we had to get to that point of capitulation, right? And so that's what war, unfortunately, there are collateral pieces that happen. No one intends that to happen, but those are just, that's the nature of the beast. If your government decides to do that and get into a war, then they own some of that collateral issue because they're the ones that got you in there in the first place.
Well, it was interesting because when I was, we would always visit Camp Buka, which was a large detainee facility. They kept a lot of high-value targets there. But pretty much none of them, at least when I was there, were from Iraq. They were from other countries. And these were like the masterminds running the IED factories, the snipers, back in the day. I don't know if you remember, his name was Juba. They used to call him Juba, the Baghdad sniper. And there's still videos. Yeah. And this guy was just Iranian trained, just taking out soldiers, and they would release these propaganda videos and things. But it's so weird too, because when we would walk around these detainee facilities, or the little or smaller prisons around Iraq that we were helping out, and you would look at these guys' faces, and you knew that they were responsible for the deaths of fellow servicemen. But it's also like, they are human too, and for whatever reason, like, you're just both in a space at the same time, recognizing each other. For me, it was always a weird, like, philosophical, I guess you would call it that, like, internal dilemma. Like, I didn't want to hate the guy, and I didn't hate
Well,
any
you
of them.
couldn't, because he's only wearing the uniform of his country,
Right?
And you're wearing the uniform of your country.
And then you just kind of wish that for whatever reason that this whole thing happened, that why are we there? You just kind of wish it didn't happen because, these guys should be home with their families. Right. Our guys should be alive and at home with their families, our men and women. But unfortunately, you're just there at that point in time with each other after all these events. Yep. It always kind of like, it cycles through my mind, it's, I guess, the human psyche in general and how we handle things, how these governments, can, and I guess you'd call them like warlords or whoever, they play everyone with the strings and they bring us into these events, and it's millions of people suffering for these few people. But it's all right. That's another conversation.
Well, war is nothing more than an extension of political and diplomatic means, from the leadership of one country to a leadership of another country. Yeah. And so it's not the private starting a war. It's the top that instigates the issue.
Yeah. So, and you said there was no like green on green, blue on blue incidents while you were there, yeah?
Not that I recall. There might have been one or two things down south, but I really don't believe anybody had called. We didn't recognize anything as blue and blue.
Oh, I see.
And for me, it was just treat everybody with dignity and respect. There were certain things that happened that we as Americans didn't understand about Afghans, and I'm sure Iraqis had the same issue about these countries and what they may or may not do on certain days of the week. And so we just, hey, that's them. That's not, that's not who we are. But we don't talk bad about them. They don't talk bad about us. We all have our own cultural issues and concerns and things that we do and practices. And so just ignore what they're doing and carry on with your career or your life and do things you want to do. And so, but I think some people just took it upon themselves to make fun of or maybe tease or and not really understanding. Maybe they started as a joke, maybe not. But they misunderstood their cultural practices and maybe said some things out loud that people didn't like. Oh, yeah. And then now you've got people that are upset. And when you're like that and you don't talk it out because you can't, or if you need an interpreter in between, those things happen. And then, but I don't see, you didn't see Americans shooting them. It was always them shooting us. Yeah. And there were lots of reasons for that. It wasn't just because Americans didn't understand their cultural differences, but there were, like I said, infiltrators that, the bad people got into their ranks and we're just waiting for opportunities.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. And then, so I guess Do you have anything that you would consider your greatest accomplishment? Probably just,
In Afghanistan?
yeah,
Well, absolutely.
setting
So,
all that up, yeah.
well, the big thing was, and yeah, if I had some pictures to show you, I could show you an empty building, Quonset hut, basically, or a hut. And then what we turned that into a TOC, or Tactical Operations Center, with TV screens and radios and computers, and I had a 2-section, a 3-section, a 4-section, a 6, and I just everything you would think you would need in an operations center. We put that all together, and it wasn't me. It was, here's my vision.
Yeah.
This is what I'd like. Go out and have fun, and they did, and they did amazing stuff. It was just truly, I mean. And they would come back and say, I found a warehouse. It's got all these radios and got TV screens. Okay. And I might or might not have been able to do what I did, but I got everything. I'm like, all right, bring it all in here. Let's all account for it. Put it all on the books. I want nothing is off the books. Everything goes on by serial number on these books. I sign for it all, and then I'll turn it over to my replacement. And everybody did. They did everything. So everything was accounted for. Everything was there. Maybe the acquisition wasn't always by the paperwork, but it all got taken care of before we left. And so, but yeah, I had to count for every Humvee, every piece of equipment in a Humvee. I mean, it was amazing. I things I didn't even know I had. And so we got the talk together, got operations going. We had 24/7 ops. I was in contact with all the teams out there, even though they were hours away. And so I felt comfortable. I felt comfortable that these young men and women that were there, active guard and reserve, all different services, all worked together. And we had, oh, by the way, a couple, I think 100, almost 100 or 50 to 100 civilian policemen that were on contract by a contracting company, defense contracting company, that were there to help us. And so they were the more law enforcement experienced guys. We were there to help, not teach them law enforcement skills, but to teach them personnel accountability, equipment accountability, how to do intelligence, how to do other stuff. And so we taught kind of the military piece, and then civilian law enforcement did the practical police stuff. How to investigate an accident scene, how to investigate a crime scene, a murder scene, and things like that. Like I said, they didn't do traffic citation or anything. And so, but the big thing that my takeaway from this whole thing that really laid it on the line for me that we did the right thing was to get them to understand community policing. And so they didn't have the concept. I learned the concept back in Hawaii with the HPD and working as a patrolman and as a detective on getting out with the community, meeting with them, understanding what the issues are, and then helping them solve these issues, whether we're involved or not. You may not need a law enforcement component to solve it, but we're there to help solve problems. And so the one thing we had to do is help, one, get the police commander and then all of his chiefs, his 10 provincial chiefs and then his 100 district chiefs, and then filter that all the way through to the ground troops. The policemen on the ground is understanding that you're the face of the Afghan National Police. You're the ones with the uniform, with the badge and the gun. And so you need to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And then when I first got there, the police were, they had a different mindset, and they would stand on the street, they would collect taxes from people. And so I said, we need to stop that. We need to
Taxes or
yeah.
bribes?
Be that as it may. And so, the country now had a way to get taxes. They now had revenue streams and they had systems in place, albeit they were still getting it all together. But by and large, they had systems in place to help them financially for the country to make money. And so grabbing, $10 from the taxi cab driver or the local food guy driving through, and that needs, we need to stop that. If that's not what we're there for, which it wasn't, then we need to stop that. And that took me a couple months to get it through. And then also to be good policemen, to be policemen that, okay, you're not going to write tickets for traffic, but you need to get the traffic moving. There's so much traffic in Kabul, unbelievable. And so it's and there's no such thing as a one-way street. There's always two ways to everything, even though there are signs that say that. And so the matter of, okay, let's keep everybody flowing in the right direction. Let's get accidents off the road nicely, and let's help people clean up and get their things going. If they need a tow, if they need a fix, it'd be difficult. They don't have tow trucks per se there, but they can help people move. If a family lives on the upper hills of the mountain and you see mom and dad who are 90 years old trying to walk up groceries, let's go help them get that stuff up there, because even though you live higher up on the mountain in Cabo and you got a nice view, doesn't mean that costs more than the person down at the street level, because there's no road up here.
Yeah.
There's no car going up there. And so you got to walk through the sewer system to get up there. And so a little different contrast than what we believe, and we're so spoiled in America. And until you get to other countries and see this kind of stuff, you don't realize, not you personally, but people out there in the world that don't understand what they have is so important. And it's way above what anybody else has. Even some of the poorest people here in America have way above what other countries have. And so at the end of my tour, just before, we had a big meeting with all the 5 regions came together, all the police chiefs, the 2, 3, and 4 stars that ran the police. Minister of Interior was there, the president was there. So we had, and my generals were there, the ground commander, the C-Sticka, they call them, combined area, I forget the terminology, it's been a number of years. But so the 3-star was there. General Cohn was the person in charge back then. And so everybody showed up at this meeting at the hotel. And so we had a big briefing. Each region covered their high points, some low points, some issues and concerns, kind of like we would expect in the military for a briefing. And so we did all of that. And at the end of that, the Minister of Interior told the U.S. General, hey, the central region, that's the region every other region should emulate. These guys are doing it right. They got the concepts down. Community policing is working. The Afghan national people view the police a little bit differently than when we got there, till 6-8 months later. And so I knew I was on the right track, and I knew even it was a long shot, and trying to convince somebody to change is very difficult, and sometimes it takes years and decades. But I commend the general for taking it up and saying, you know what, we'll try it. I'll make sure we get implemented, and he did, and they got accolades for it. And
That's
I
awesome.
believe he's a 3-star today, still at the Afghan National Police headquarters level.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Oh, wow. I wonder what he's thinking about what's going on now with the withdrawal.
I'm not sure. He always wanted to come to America. He always wanted to get away and get his kids here. He wanted to get out of Afghanistan.
Oh, really?
I think more so to see the rest of the world, not
Yeah.
because he didn't like Afghanistan, but he always wanted to travel. And so that was one of the things he had told me is, how do I get to America to come visit? And so that was, I was trying to help facilitate that. There was a program where we could bring, say, the general and several of his key staff to come with us to America to go see a police department in the mainland.
Oh, that would have been...
Yeah, and they had it done, but so we were trying to get that done, but it was a lot harder because in 2007, 2008, all the big money and stuff were going to Iraq, the war in Iraq, and Afghanistan was not getting all the love that it should have gotten. It was still getting things, but it wasn't getting as much. Most of the focus, or the you call it military terms, the main effort was Iraq. And the supporting effort was Afghanistan. And years before that, it was the other way around, right? So,
Yeah, and that's interesting too. Like, I wonder what kind of impact it would have had if you brought over like their leadership and kind of showed them the U.S. in a sense, and this is
yeah.
Look-
To understand police departments the way we see it.
yeah. So I guess would they have to like provide security and things? Is that why like it would just cost too much to bring them over, or they were just like, nah, we're not spending nothing on it?
It would have been expensive, but it wouldn't have been impossible. I mean, I think maybe there was a fear of somebody not wanting to go home or back to Afghanistan.
Yeah, that's true too. You don't want to lock them down while they're here, right? Yeah, that makes sense. it kind of reminds me of like all the interpreters that we were supposed to bring over but haven't.
But it was a. I know they had done it before, so there was a way to do it. It was just how do you?
Yeah, because it's kind of like I think of it in a sense like we were saying before, like if you go to another country and you see what they have compared to what we have, and you come back and it's like, oh, our homeless people have like iPhones. Now they should. That's a whole other discussion. But I'm just saying, like, when you look at the U.S. and how far better off we are, even if you're homeless, compared to the other parts of the world, it's.
Yeah, they don't. Their homeless population's a lot different than ours.
Yeah. So you leave. So what? You did a year, yeah? Just
shy of a year. It was probably at or about 365 days.
So
about 10 months boots on the ground in Afghanistan.
Yeah, it seems like you were you were hustling because
You
had to set it all up, and then you had to start meeting with everyone and build those relationships.
Well, all of that was ongoing while they were setting up the talk.
Oh, I
so it was kind of we still did our day job.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of set the talk up at night in our off hours, but during the probably 8 to 5, we were at the headquarters. We were out and about on the streets with the Afghan National Police, doing operations, doing things with them.
See.
And as soon as they would bed down for the night and kind of start sending everybody home, I would stay back for a little while because they had an NDS general who's kind of like their CIA, FBI kind of person. Mm-hmm. And so I would, I'd have tea with him and get to know him a lot better. There was the deputy commander. I would hang out with that guy. And then they had a detective or CID person, like someone in charge of their criminal investigation part, not the patrol per se. And so I would sit down with them. And so I'd have tea at night with them. And so the 2-star would go home and relax for a while. And then I would just hang out. And I would send all my team back. Mm-hmm. And I would just have a police truck take me back later.
Oh,
which drove my people absolutely crazy.
Yeah, right? Because you didn't have like personal security detail.
I mean, I had one, but I sent them back to go eat dinner.
Yeah, I see.
I said, I'm fine. I'm in the police headquarters. I'm surrounded by, 60, 70 cops. We're okay.
Yeah.
And having been a cop, I was okay, but because I was a policeman, to me it was okay. And when you get in country and anytime you go to war and you're in that environment, you accept death quite easily. You've come to the realization that you're going to die.
Yeah.
And it more so, I mean, I might have had it when I was a policeman and I didn't understand it. But when I got into country after the first 2 weeks and I realized, okay, I may never leave here. But you know what? I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I'm fine because I'm here for a purpose. And that purpose wasn't about Joe Logan. That purpose was about Afghan National Police. Mm-hmm. And what can I do to help them, help themselves, help their country. And that's what made me fulfilled by the time I left.
Yeah, and you're right about that. Like, I think when people first are leaving or getting ready to leave, they're around their family and friends. There's the nervousness. They're scared. You get to Kuwait. You hate Kuwait so much. You just want to get out of there. You're not even thinking about anything. I think it took me probably maybe a month, but we were running missions. When I first got there, we were training. We were onboarding and learning from the PSD team we were leaving.
Yeah, left seat, right seat.
Yeah. And then once we took over, I think that you're just worried about the guys next to you, and really, I think it probably took me about a month, and it was just like, we'll go. If something happens, something happens. But you're just, the other thing is, I think you're so confident in the training, because I think especially when you're doing that training right when you're about to leave, you start taking it more serious than if it's just a regular training event throughout the year. You start taking it more serious, and especially when you start doing training in the country. And I'm not sure how Afghanistan was because I didn't go there, just Iraq. But Iraq is like random mortar attacks, and you would hear vehicle bombs going off right outside the gates and things. You learn to take it real serious, real fast,
Yeah, so you're scared to death because they teach about all that. And then you get in country, and you don't know who's friendly, who's enemy.
Yeah.
Right? But one of the things I had to do and I quickly learned, it took me about 3 months to figure this out. But I would get people that are redeploying, right? So they went to Iraq maybe a year ago, and now their turn is coming up again, and they're coming in country to Afghanistan. And they're going to drive their Humvees like they were driving in Iraq. I said, whoa, wait a minute. We own the hearts and minds. We don't ram cars. We don't drive like maniacs. We don't do any of those things. Yeah, you still got to be scared about everybody on the road because the motorcycle might be a suicide guy, it might be the taxi cab driver next to you, but you cannot let that bother you to the point where you. We just have to accept the fact that we're in and amongst bad people with many more good people. Not Iraq might have been different, but Afghanistan is not.
Iraq was a lot of good. I didn't meet any Iraqi person that we had to interact with or anything that I didn't like.
Yeah, I think I've just heard stories about, people ramming convoys. And
Oh,
things.
yeah.
Now,
Well,
we had those things that happened in Afghanistan.
that didn't happen to me, so I can't.
Yeah.
But I just think like it's kind of like when somebody's in your neighborhood and they're trying to tell you, "Hey,
Right.
back up! Hey, man, what?"
So to me, I took it upon myself and I had one team. They came to me one day and they said, sir, we drive on this certain road every day, and every day we drive, there's a hillside, and then these young kids or they're, maybe 10 to 12 to 15 years old. They're throwing rocks at us and they're going to kill us one of these days. So can we shoot them? And I'm like,
What?
no. What makes you think, could you do that in the United States? No. Then why would we do it here? So there's a lot of mentality. You got to change cultures and minds.
Yeah.
And so you never know what you're going to get when you get there, right? So you've got people you've never met before. You didn't train as a unit, so you're not sure. So it's very difficult when you're thrown into that kind of system of here, take command of this organization that has never met each other. And now you've got to form this huge conglomerate team. And oh, by the way, people are hours away, and you got to get everybody to kind of get on the same sheet of music. And you're other people's battle space, and you got to cross people's battle space, and they get upset because they don't know who you are, and you're driving. And oh, by the way, the Humvee that I was in came from Afghanistan, so the Blue Force Tracker, or came from Iraq, so it still had the Iraq unit number and didn't have a current unit, so nobody knew it belonged to. And so you're driving around going, well, who is this? Well, I can't tell you who is this on an open radio. But you might want to talk to so-and-so, and they'll tell you who I am. And then you get, sorry, sir, didn't mean to, and so they get to know who you are. But they know who you are because the chain of command can tell you, oh, that guy is so-and-so, and he's...
I think you made a wrong turn there, Brad. This is not Iraq. Yeah, it's interesting, all the little nuances.
Oh, it's amazing. And it's so challenging, but so rewarding. I wanted to go back so many times. My wife is like, no.
I would have liked
changing the locks.
to go back in like a different role, something more like dealing with the actual community. I guess like civil affairs or something. One thing I just didn't, I never understood is, and I never agreed with, is the fact that the rules of engagement, like they send troops out to just walk, and they can't react until something happens. But in my opinion, like if something happens, it's too late. Like,
well, so it's all about trust, right? So you got to build, you as that squad or platoon going out of the wire or team to do, maybe not, you're not trying to find a bad person. You're out there to go maybe to a shura, or you go there to the bazaar because a couple soldiers want to buy something. But you're going there as a team, and you're out there to integrate into their society, their communities. And then you need to meet them and get to know them. So you got to build that trust factor. Once you build a trust factor, you're going to see the guy on the side going and starting to look funny, like he's got a twitch, but he's telling you there's something bad around the corner, or somebody's waiting, or that's a roadside bomb, or that car's wired. And so they did it all the time in Afghanistan and Iraq. They saved countless lives of U.S., not just U.S. soldiers, but all kinds of people. And so but you got to build that trust first. Just like the police departments here in the United States. If you don't build trust in a community you're going into, no one's going to tell you, give it the time of day.
Yeah. I loved the bazaars in Iraq, though. Now you say that. And the tea, because we used to go to the Minister of Justice's compound, and the general would meet with him, and then some of the PSD team members would be in there too. We wouldn't take our weapons, and we wouldn't wear our gear. We would just be there, kind of like you were saying earlier. Then they would always give us tea. Now, of course, we had to put like a ton of sugar in it. But those are just kind of I had a different role than I guess a lot of the average soldiers had. I didn't kick in doors. Thankfully, we didn't lose anyone. We didn't get hit. supposedly we got shot at. Our rear truck, who was a National Guard unit that was attached to us, they apparently got shot at supposedly, but kind of think that they wanted a combat action badge, so we didn't really take it that serious. Yeah, but other than that, it was nothing really major. Yeah, you hear the music, yeah?
Yeah,
Yeah, I was like,
some
it's always jamming. It's in their backpack.
a different group of people hanging around. They went into the store next door.
Yeah. So when you were packing up, closing up shop, I'm assuming you gave an amazing handoff to the next guy or girl.
Yeah,
whoever
we
took
did
over.
our normally you pass the guide on, the unit flag.
Yeah.
But I passed the cell phone, so
That's
but that's all we had.
Yeah.
But then we did make a regional police advisory command. I paid for the guide on, basically the flag. So when the sergeant major got a stick and everything and put it all together. So that became the way that we changed command after that.
Oh,
So,
that's awesome.
we did all that, and it was very sad when I left. I mean, and a lot of teams changed out when I took over. In about 3 months, I started losing half my people, and then I started getting more people coming in. And so, you just get to meet these people. You see them, maybe once every other week, because you got to make battlefield circulation and stuff. And then, oh, by the way, you got to do all the administrative meetings you got to go to. And I think there was at least twice a week I was at Camp Phoenix with my general. We were briefing the 3-star who's briefing the president. And so you gotta get all your ducks in a row, get your information up there and get all that data going forward. And so, and then you've got to get out. I've got to go meet with and sleep out in the field with all the other units that are out there with my teams. And then, oh, by the way, go meet all the other police districts, because my general, I'm taking him on. We're going to go battlefield circulation. He's like, what? I said, we're going to go see all the districts. I don't know where they are, so you got to help me. Wow. And basically my way of getting him out of the headquarters and saying, hey, let's go visit all these places. And we drove everywhere. I mean, and I was told, don't go down there, you're going to get shot. Don't go over there, you're going to get shot. I'm like, well, I'm not here to get shot, but we're going because I got troops over there, or general's got to see people over there. And I don't know this for a fact, but I know my general knew everybody, good and bad. Mm-hmm. And so I believe he put some word out that says, hey, so everywhere I went, my teams got shot at when they were out in some places, rarely, but it happened. But everywhere I went, nothing happened. And the one time I came home on leave for a week, and it took me longer to get home than I spent on boots on the ground. But the general went out to recon and do battlefield circulation with his staff. They got shot at. So I was like, I was the rabbit's foot. So you wait till I come back, then let's go out. But he's a general. He's going to do what he's going to do. So, yeah. But these are the things that happen. You're there. And I got to ride horses. I mean, I thought they set me up. They put me on an Afghan racehorse, and that thing almost killed me. But a lovely horse, and we came to a come to Jesus moment there for a minute, and he finally realized, okay, you're in charge, and so it was good fun. And then I played a little joke on all the generals who thought they got one over on me by putting me on a racehorse. And so I hid from them for about 20 minutes, and they were all panicking, trying to figure out, where did he go? Somebody kidnapped him, and
we're screwed.
Yeah. And I come trotting around with the horse, and they're like, oh, he's alive. I said, yeah, I'm alive. Thanks.
That's awesome.
But yeah, my legs were sore for 2 weeks after, because they don't have saddles, right? So you learn how to ride a horse squeezing. So it's like all those muscles you never knew you had, you now realize you have them.
I don't think I ever rode a horse.
Yeah, I've rode horses with saddles, but not like that. And so, but it was, I look back at it, even today I can remember all the things I did, even though it was, a number of years ago. But I remember all the good, bad, and indifferent. I remember everything.
Yeah. And
it's just like police work. I used to keep shoe boxes in my trunk, all my notebooks, these little brown notebooks they had.
Oh, wow.
And for every time, and they'd last a couple weeks, and you'd get a new one. And then, that's all your information. You go write the report from the notebook, and you throw it in there. And I could decades later, pick one up, open it up to a page and go, start reading and go, and then it would come back in my mind and I would remember everything that happened like I'm watching a video.
Yeah,
and it
that's
was
awesome.
just amazing.
You still have those, or?
I have them somewhere. I just can't find them. But I have all the green notebooks I've kept since I probably became, I think about the time I made lieutenant colonel, I started saving those. And so all the different jobs I've had since I was a counter drug coordinator, I've kept my notebooks for those. Just someday I figured I'd write maybe some kind of memoir, not that anybody would read it, but just to write something down so I'd be able to pass that on to my grandkids and say, hey, here's what granddad did.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. You should write something.
Yeah.
Interesting. It'd be interesting to share those experiences. And then, so when you came back, what was that like? What was the... Because you were... So wait, what rank were you when you were in Afghanistan?
I was a colonel.
Oh, you were a colonel,
Yeah.
full bird.
Probably.
Oh, okay. So then you come back, and you're active duty, yeah? AGR still, or how does
Yeah, well, I came back, yes. So coming off of active duty, Title 10, converting back into, well, what I thought I was converting back into AGR, going back to the counter drug program. But little unbeknownst to me, I was already selected for the chief of staff position for the Army National Guard here in Hawaii.
Oh, that's awesome.
And that job was a GS-15 federal technician job.
Wow.
And so they told me that if you want to accept that job, you have to leave AGR and become a GS-15. Now, that didn't sit well with the spouse because you're going to lose, about $15,000, $30,000 a year in difference in pay, right?
Yeah.
So, but I believe that, that's what the organization wanted. I'm here to serve. I'm not here to dictate how, and it wasn't my place to say. I could have said no, and I could have stayed where I was, and I would have retired several years later as a colonel, and that would have been the end of my career. But in the back of my mind, always thought that there was, and I was raised a Roman Catholic, but I'm not the most religious person. I believe in God, and I believe, that they have control over things that I don't know. And so in the back of my mind, I believe that, and my wife and I had the conversation. I said, it's okay. We might lose the money now, but I think in the end, we'll be okay.
Yeah.
And I'll trust God to let him make those decisions for me in the future and how we go. And so, and my wife when I became the chief of staff, she had to leave her position because she was the executive assistant to the commander and the chief of staff. So she can't work for me.
Oh, yeah.
So prior to me leaving for Afghanistan, the general who came from the Army Reserve to be the adjutant general, my wife ended up getting a job in the Army Reserve at the 9th Mission Support Command at Fort Shafter Flats. And so she got a raise for a higher GS step, 2 steps. And so she did the same job, but she got a higher pay for it.
Oh,
and
nice.
so then that led me to be the chief of staff. And
That works.
Yeah, it all kind of worked out. And she did that for a number of years. And then she finally retired several years later.
That's awesome. I can't even get a GS7 job. I don't know. They keep denying me. Oh, man, I don't know what all I got to put on my resume.
It's all how you write the resume and the keywords that you use within the system, because they use algorithms in computer AI programs to basically.
It's just tough. Like, I don't want to make 1,000 resumes, but
You
that's
do.
probably why I won't get.
You do.
Yeah. And then, so wait, forgive me, but your role as a chief of staff, civilian or?
Well, no, because so in the Army Reserve, if you're a GS employee and in the member of the Guard of the Reserve, the positions aren't summarily linked. In other words, you can be a GS-12 colonel as an operations person in the GS world, and you could have an E8 who's a GS-14, your boss, because he's been there longer.
Yeah.
So, but in the Guard, we wanted to avoid that rank inversion issue. So we didn't have Title V civilians per se, regular federal technicians. They were, your rank and your position had to match. Your military rank and your
Oh, I
civilian
see.
position had to match. And if they didn't match, then you got a 30-day letter and you had to figure out what to do. You had to move, get promoted, or do something. And so, or you ended up unemployed. So, so you quickly got to learn the system and then understand that. So as a colonel, my GS-15 was I was the administrative officer over the entire Hawaii Army National Guard. I was the senior full-time person because my one-star commander was a part-timer. So yes, he was my boss, but he wasn't there Monday through Friday. So who's making all those decisions Monday through Friday to keep probably 25, 30% full-time force of that 3,000-man Army National Guard unit moving every day? That's the chief of staff. And so that was my role. Pay, finance, equipment, all the Title X functions, man, train, and equip, was my responsibility. So all of those colonels worked for me. And so I had to make sure that all the full-time staff, whether AGR or technician, because there are other GS-14s and 12s and 11s and 9s, and there were AGRs at colonel and captain and so on. So they all worked for the chief of staff. And then I answered to the one-star part-timer, but then the adjutant general, who is full-time, even though he's a state employee. But he also has to wear a uniform every day.
Yeah.
And he's a military 2-star general, but he's a state employee. But he's my boss, even though I'm a federal technician. I don't answer to anybody but him. Although there's a deputy and there's some other people in there. But
Yeah. So you're like in uniform?
yes, every day.
Okay. That starts to make more sense now.
So it's easy. My wife didn't have to buy a lot of clothes. For
Yeah,
me.
that's awesome. Can I ask, was your wife military or
She
civilian?
was a Department of the Army civilian.
Oh, I
So
see.
not military. She worked for the military.
Oh, I see. Cool. And then Director of Operations, Army National Guard. How did you like that one?
So I did the chief of staff job for 2.5 years.
Yeah.
And then the TAG wanted to bring me up to his level to be the chief of staff of the Joint Staff, which is something that was created back when I was in the counter-drug program. And I wrote a thesis on it from my master's at the Army War College as a young lieutenant colonel. And then after that, so we started to get this formed in every state and territory, but it wasn't full-on established. The concept that I think National Guard Bureau out of Washington, D.C. had was this is going to be, the Title X equivalent to a joint staff, and we're going to get joint credit for all these jobs we're going to do, and we're going to be joint. Well, to an extent it works, and that's what we wanted, but then it morphed into domestic operations. So anytime you did anything locally within the state to support of federal, state, and local law enforcement or community-based or what the governor needed for disaster response, any of those things, emergency management type, were domestic operations. And so what we changed civil support into, civil support is what the active duty military would do in support of civilian agencies, as long as it's not law enforcement. But the Guard would do National Guard domestic operations. And so we could do law enforcement, we could do a number of things. So in 2008, 9, we had APEC here.
Yeah.
Or was it 11? One of those years. And so I was the chief of staff of the Army National, or the Joint
I think
Staff.
it was 11.
Yeah. So when APEC came, of course, you had President Obama coming, and you had all these other presidents and prime ministers from how many other countries in the Pacific all coming to Hawaii.
That's awesome.
And we were only concerned about 3. That was Russia, China, and U.S. So those are the 3 presidents with the major concern of, but other people had other responsibilities. We were just focused on those 3 with other U.S. forces. And so we put together about 1,000 guardsmen on state active duty in support of federal, state, local law enforcement. And while they weren't armed that you could see, they had all the requirements they needed in the event they needed them. And so they were in other Humvees at arm's length. And so they were well versed in how to use them. So rules of use of force and all kinds of things. We sent them to training with HPD, and they got all this qualifications, and we had electronic weapons, so tasers and things like that. So less than lethal means. We used all those things we got trained in, and so. But as the chief of staff of the Joint Staff, my job is to make sure all that works and runs and is coordinated. And I'm working with the TAG and all the federal, state, and local agencies and trying to coordinate all of this for as long as APEC lasted 10 or 12 days. Got none of the credit for it, but I did.
That's how it goes, though, right? Yeah.
But I don't. To me, it's all about making it happen.
Yeah.
Getting it done. Everybody get home safe, and then let's go on. And Monday we go back to work. And we're normal.
It also seems like you're the type of person that loves a challenge.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
Those types of things really keep your brain functioning, yeah?
I think so. I'm never scared to jump into any new job with both feet and just go.
Yeah.
I don't need to research the job. I mean, I do basic research. But I mean, I don't try to find the last person who had it, tell me all the intricate details I need to know, and write down what policy procedure I got to do for this. No, just get me in the job and I'll figure it out.
Yeah, that's always the best way, just more hands-on, yeah? Yeah. So you were the full bird. When did you get your first star?
So.
And were you proud? Were you like...
So I got selected for I got submitted and was granted a certificate of eligibility, a COE, and went up through Congress and the president. And so that lasts 3 years, I think. And so there was another colonel with me. We both got COEs at the same time. And then one adjutant general retired, the new general came in. And then they promoted this other guy because he was part-time and I'm full-time. So it's very difficult to make general if you're full-time because there's no position for you, per se. There is, and there was a way to do it, but nobody had done it before. And so it's like, Logan, you're not going to be the first one. We have to feel this out. We got to see how other states are doing.
Yeah.
I said, fine, okay. So then I had to worry about, okay, so if I wanted to make general, now I had to figure out, I had to get a job outside and get a full-time gig going on. So I couldn't go back to the police department because I'd been out almost, 15 years now.
Wow, yeah.
And so can I go back into that? Can I join law enforcement somewhere else? Can I do some? So I started putting resumes out. So I learned how to write resumes for other GS positions outside of the Hawaii National Guard. I could be a GS anywhere else, and then you have to have positions. And there's only, in the Army Guard, there was only 3 positions to make general. And you were either the TAG, the Deputy Adjutant General, or you were the brigade commander. At the time was a 1-star billet, and then they took that away. So and they converted them all to 06s. And so then the only way was to be the director of the Joint Staff. So you could be Army Guard or Air Guard, but if you held that GS-15 position, you could be a 1-star. So that was the other way to do it. And so, but it's all about timing, and it's all about making everything work. And so timing for me wasn't quite right. I had put in for other things. I did a couple of interviews. I almost got selected for one position, but I kind of backed out for I think it was the sustainment unit, the theater sustainment unit. And I was, I wanted it, but I wasn't quite sure that I was ready to leave military service yet. And then the governor, Abercrombie, was not doing well in the polls. I saw this at the end of his term. I thought, I watched Governor Ige do his opening, it's not a podcast, but an opening Facebook Live or something he did at Honolulu Elementary School or Pearl City, one of the Pearl City elementary schools, because he's from the district of Pearl City as a senator. And so I saw that and I said, this guy's going to be our next governor. So then I said, well, let me just hang around. I know I can apply for the position. I got a COE. I had to go in for an extension, so I got that just before the governor lost his primary election in August. And then it was inevitable in November.
Right.
And whoever the Democratic governor was going to get elected. Although we had some talented other people in the other party, but it just wasn't going to happen. After Governor Lingle was the first time in 40 years there was a Republican governor. It was going to be a while before the next Governor Lingle type person came along. And so, and so I saw, I in my mind, I realized he's going to be our next governor. Let me give this one last shot. If I put in for the tag position, I think I'm qualified. I've worked for the last two adjutants generals. I've been a colonel for at least 7 years now, working for them, working with them, representing them all over the place. Yeah. And so I think I have, but I didn't know all about the job, but militarily I understood. Mm-hmm. And so I did. I applied. I was one of 10 applicants that applied for the deputy and or the adjutant general position. They're both state entity positions. Went in for the interview. Was kind of different in my perspective because the governor was there for the interview, and I didn't expect him to be there the first day. I figured you get through the initial, his inner circle, and if you can get through that, then you get to go meet the boss. If he likes you, he hires you, he's going to meet several other people, whatever chemistry works, right? So they interviewed all of us. Like I said, the governor was there. 3 weeks go by, I figured, no, this is done. Yeah. I would have known by now. Sure enough, on a Wednesday, like the 27th of December, he calls and asked me, would you like to be the tag? And I said, absolutely. And so I accepted. And then he says, you start on the 1st. And I said, well, I think this might have been the 28th or 29th. Yeah, the 29th on a Wednesday. And Friday was the 1st. It was a holiday. And then Saturday and Sunday. And I'm like, I'm going to go from a GS-15 to a state employee. And I have to do it by the 1st. Wow. So that means I had Thursday. I needed to be at the headquarters to let everybody know, or at least the state off, but I couldn't tell anybody until the governor gave the announcement on the news. At the 3:00 news on
Thursday?
On Thursday, the New Year's Eve day. And so it was it was a challenge. And like I love challenges. And but sure enough, I went down the next morning and I went to the state office that works there for the Department of Defense, and I said, I need your help, and here's what I need to do. And she looked at me and laughed. She goes, you're like the 10th person to come in here and say they're the tag. And you need to do this. And so, we'll wait till the governor gets the announcement at 3:00, and then you can. I said, no, you got to understand, because tomorrow is a holiday. And I've got to go from GS-415 to a state employee tomorrow. Wow. And so I need to be on the list. And I need to do all the paperwork. And she just laughed again. And it's just timing. So my phone goes off. And back then we had Blackberries. And so the governor had the signed letter that says, you've been appointed as the adjutant general. And I got that. And I said, how does this help? And she looked at that and went, oh, and I won't say exactly what she said, but she got the message, and then that was it. And they went to work, and they were fantastic. They were, we had a good, and I used that years later in conversations with other people, because it's a great story. I mean, they didn't know, and we have people that play practical jokes all the time. Right. And then I had to go upstairs and the tag was off. He was gone. So I couldn't tell him, and I assume he already knew, because they would have told him you're not being reinstated. But then the deputy was a friend of mine, a guy that I worked with, and a great officer. And I had to go tell him that, oh, by the way, me and so-and-so are now going to be the adjutant general and deputy. And he had his room cleared. He was all ready for whatever happened. Yeah. But he was one of the 10 that applied to be the adjutant general. And so I felt awkward to tell him, because I didn't know it was me telling him, but I figured I should at least give him the courtesy. As an officer to officer, you got to have that courtesy, even though I wasn't supposed to. But and I told him, and he understood, he got it.
Especially if there's a time crunch like that, that's pretty funny.
Yeah.
I don't know much about like the paperwork and things that it takes to transition one to the other, but
it's just your pay, your emergency card, your kids, your dependents, your W-2 forms, your W-4 forms. How do you fill out all the forms that you need to really become a state employee? It's money. I mean, it's not. It's monotonous stuff, but it's so necessary. And the people that work in the sate office can do it quickly.
Yeah.
Because they know what all that means. And if you asked me to fill it out, I'd be like,
Yeah. I don't know.
I'd be there for a week still trying to figure it out. But they're amazing people. They did it all in a couple hours, and they were done.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And then so what? So then Friday is the holiday.
Right. So that was
the first.
Wednesday. Wednesday afternoon. So Thursday comes along. So Thursday morning I go in, I get all the paperwork done. I'm still at GS-14, but now we're having a block party on our neighborhood. So everybody's waiting for the 3:00 news because everybody knows the new governor's going to pick his cabinet, and he's waiting for all these things. And January 1st, you start because December 5th he was sworn in already. So he's already the governor, and so January 1st, the start of the new year, everything. So there's certain positions he didn't fill yet or he didn't name yet. And so the Adjutant General was one of those. And so a lot of people knew I was in the Guard. They had an idea who I was, but they didn't know really what was going on. And then, so I had my work phone and my personal phone with me, and my wife and I was drinking a beer with my neighbor and just having a good time. And I knew already what was going to happen, but I can't tell anybody.
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting there, and then 3:00, and then at 3:01, boom, 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 phones just start going crazy.
Awesome.
And everybody's like, and I'm trying to answer, and I'm texting, and everybody's yelling congratulations. And it was great. The neighborhood was just, they were so elated, and it was, my wife was happy. And although she knew what the job was going to entail, she didn't realize how busy it was going to be for me. Or I was told that no one traveled more than I did as previous tags. But previous tags didn't have the same job I had. By the time I got in the seat, the job had changed twofold from the last guy.
Oh, yeah.
Because Homeland Security was now broadening its horizon. And so I wore 3 hats. I was Director of Emergency Management. I was a Homeland Security Advisor to the Governor, which is something brand new being started by DHS. And the former tag had it, but he didn't have it quite like I had it. And then I was the Director of the State Department of Defense, this monster organization that you got to run, and all the entities, and then, oh, by the way, you're commander of the Army and the Air National Guard. And so,
anything else?
Yeah.
You guys need anything else from me?
And then you have a youth challenge program. You got to make sure that works and runs up. And then, oh, by the way, there's this little organization that does tremendous work called the Office of Veteran Services, run by Colonel Hahn. Does an outstanding job with his team, taking care of all the veterans in the state, no matter whether you're active or Guard or Reserve. And you've got administrative oversight of that organization too, and you're just like, ooh. I'm one person.
Is that Ron Hahn?
Ron Hahn, yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. I've met him a few times. When I worked at the Capitol, would always email him things. He's a super nice guy. Yeah, he's super, like, if you ask him something, he's on it.
Oh, he's on it.
Yeah. So that's always impressive. Yeah.
And then you take over this job in January 1st. So then 15 days later, I was promoted to general. Although state, I was promoted immediately, but I had to wait for federal recognition. Because I had a COE, it was almost near instantaneous, but it took 15 days for the paperwork to catch up. And then, so the governor pinned me in his office. I didn't want a big ceremony. I just wanted him to do it right then and there. Yeah, so I had a big ceremony afterwards. But basically, because he wanted me to be at several meetings and he didn't want me coming as a colonel because he wanted a general. And I told him I have a COE, I'll get promoted very quickly. And so I didn't want to let him down. So I bugged NGB to say, hey, I've got this, I'm promoted, it's my job. It's a 2-star billet, but I need to make 1 star first. And they said, we got it. And so they rustled through paperwork, got everything done. And everybody worked really hard to get to where they needed me to be. And so I showed up at these meetings as a 1-star general, which is exactly what the governor, he wanted that firepower with him because he's meeting with, the admirals and commanders from all the other services. And then, oh, by the way, what they didn't tell you and what you learn rather quickly is, January is when you submit your budget. Well, actually, you had to submit it before that. But now I have a $180 million budget, of which $20 million is state, and then the federal government. But I need the state entities to help me create certain levers and limits and floor and ceiling expenditures so that I can take in federal money and spend it. So you don't just get federal dollars and spend it in your state entity. So this all has to be calculated, coordinated, and approved. And so here I am in front of I'm meeting the governor for the first time in a now an official capacity as a tag, and I've got a briefing. Here's my budget. Here's what I need. Here's what you're trying to cut for me. You can't do that. I need this. I need this. So I had to go in and argue my budget, and I got most of it. I didn't get everything, but that's be that as it may. And then you've got to go in front of the state legislature, and you've got to argue this in front of them and justify all your expenditures, and it's fun.
Did you go personally? How was that?
It was the first time I played the card of being the new guy on the block, and I didn't know what I didn't know, and so don't hold me accountable. But I didn't work the second time, right? And they held my feet. They were very cordial the first time, and they understood you're brand new. Let's not pick on Joe this first time. But the second time and third time, if you don't have your coordination and understanding, and you don't have the budget down to a T, and you know everything, you're going to get eaten alive, because they're there to make sure that you're expending state dollars in a proper fashion, and they're not going to give you any more or any less.
Right.
You got to make sure you justify it and spend it properly, and absolutely that's their job and that's their role. And so you got to come in there with that mindset and say, okay, here's every penny I need. Here's why I need it, and here's where it's going.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, I'm asking for more. And if you give me a dollar more state, I can get you $3 more federal. So for every dollar you give me an increase, I can get you more money into the state economy and spend that money just as viably as I'm spending your state dollars for valid reasons, for things that we need in the state, for construction projects, you name it, for training and exercises and all the things we need to do as soldiers to make sure, and airmen, to make sure we're ready to go when the nation needs us, but also ready to go when the state needs us. And oh, by the way, these little things called disasters that might happen every few years, like a hurricane or flood or lava, you don't get any extra money for that. That's not an operational you get funded for. You get funded for the day-to-day ops to keep things running, basically. And so if something happens in a disaster, now I have to go and ask for more money.
Yeah.
Because now I got to fund that in state active duty capacity, because the federal government doesn't pay for it. Now they paid for COVID, and this is kind of a new thing that the Title 10. We've been arguing with Title 10 Pentagon for years about Title 32 state active duty disaster response when it's a federally recognized disaster and the president says you need help, and I'm going to send you help. So why don't you help pay for that? So what we do now is we go to FEMA. FEMA goes, ask the president, they get money that way, and it just comes back. It's the same pile of money from the federal government, but it's different buckets. And so whether it's DOD paying or FEMA paying, it's still coming from the national, it's coming out of Congress.
Seems like typical government, Go here, there.
So it's who's going to pay who. And but I think now they've kind of opened this Pandora's box of Title 32, and we actually did it when we had to go help American Samoa for the 2009 earthquake tsunami that they had. Or maybe it was, I know I was chief of staff at the time. So here we're sending guardsmen to American Samoa because the governor of American Samoa was in Hawaii having dinner with the governor of Hawaii when the island is getting hit. Now, one, that looks bad, but you can't plan disasters. They happen. And now, so he's asking our governor for help. The governor's asking the TAG for help. The Army Reserve is in American Samoa with the 100 Battalion. But there is, you don't just put Title 10 people on disasters. It's not that simple. There's another process you have to do. And so we sent guardsmen down to go help, along with, FEMA, along with the Defense Support to Civil Authorities team that was out of the 196th, out of active duty. Their job is disaster response.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. That's. I couldn't imagine, did the disaster happen while that governor from American Samoa was here, or was it it happened and then he came here?
No, he was here at the time.
That's...
So it was just an earthquake. It was a fluke. It was an earthquake and a tsunami.
That's such a shame.
There's no way to plan for. You don't know these things are going to happen. Like the Japanese earthquake in 2009, was it, that came across and hit Hawaii. We learned all about tsunamis after that. What I didn't know about tsunamis. And then as a colonel, as the chief of the Joint Staff, I'm directing all of that support for the units on the ground, that the commanders on the ground need resources. So now I'm trying to funnel all these resources.
Get them what they need, yeah.
Yeah.
And then, so you're the adjutant
Adjutant General.
general.
Yeah. So it's a 2-star billet. So I made 1 star, and then after about 6-8 months, I was talking to the 4-star up at National Guard Bureau. We were in a class together, and I said, "Hey, is there a way for me to make 2-star?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna-
Because I got to wait a year, and then you got to put your paperwork in, and then there's another year, and so about 2 years down the road. So by the end of the first term, I'm making my 2nd star of the governor's first 4-year term. But there's a way for me to get promoted to 2-star, even though I'm federally recognized under Title 10 rules. So if I leave the country, I'm a 1-star. But as long as I'm in the continental United States, I'm a 2-star. So the governor wrote a letter to the 4-star. The 4-star wrote a letter back saying, yes, promote him to 2-star.
Oh, that's awesome.
He's authorized. He gets all the, all the benefits required. I didn't get the pay of a 2-star. I got the pay of a 1-star. But I got all the I'm trying to think of the terminology. There's the rights and privileges of a 2-star.
I see.
So I was treated like a 2-star, and most people had no clue, except when I went to Indonesia, Singapore, Philippines. They're like, I thought you were wearing 2-star in Hawaii last week.
Oh, yeah.
It's a long story.
Yeah.
If you got time, let's sit down and have a beer, and I'll tell you about it. But if not, let's just call it what it is. I'm a 1-star general for now. And so it was always a fun conversation to have with your counterparts from other countries who didn't understand it. But so I had this huge ceremony at the Washington Place. The First Lady of the state offered up the Washington Place. Beautiful location. Spent a lot of money in catering food and all that stuff, and they had probably 400 or 500 people came.
Wow.
Senior leaders from all over were there, and business leaders and people I've known. Like half of my high school graduation class was there. And,
Wow.
and so it was a great opportunity.
Oh, yeah,
People
St.
from
Louis, yeah.
HPU that I graduated from Hawaii Pacific University. The president came and all that. So I had great relationships with all these people. And I had the former police chief, but he was there and his entourage. And so it was a great opportunity. And so, the governor said a few things, and then he pinned me 2-star. My wife pinned me. My kids were there. And great opportunity. My other two brothers were there. Well, my one brother was sailing somewhere. He wasn't there. So his wife came to represent him, and my younger brother was there. And I did this really nice it was a funny speech. Try to write humor into everything when I get to the audiences talk. Doesn't always go over well, but that's okay. I have a dry sense of humor. And so I told a lot of stories, and I had everybody in stitches by the time we were. So it was a great opportunity.
That's awesome.
But that's how I made 2-stars. So the governor was happy that I was, and then I finally. There were some hiccups along the way, like anything. When you become a general, the inspector general person comes to talk to you, and not personally. I mean, he talked to all of us, and so we have these tag meetings. So we'd all fly up to DC, go meet with the 4-star, and we'd have a maybe 2 or 3 day conference, and then part of that hour of one of those days, the inspector general, the 3-star, comes in, and he says, "Okay, here's what's going to happen. You're a general. All right, you're not any prettier, not any smarter. You're not anything more than you were 3 weeks ago when you were a colonel. All right, so just get that out of your head now, and don't do anything stupid. Just be who you are, follow the ethics and all the things." And they have to say these things, right? Because there's always somebody.
It's always one.
Yeah, there's always one.
I guess, like we discussed before, if you want to touch on the missile alert crisis,
So,
but you don't have to. I mean,
January 13th, 2018, at 8:01 in the morning, there was an alert that went out over the IPAWS system. I forget exactly what it stands for, but it's a warning system that the FCC and the FEMA put together to allow states and municipality emergency management organizations use cell phones technology to get information in widespread areas. And so you can geolocate that information. So if like there's a tsunami just in Waikiki, you could put it out so that just the phones in Waikiki would be hit with, hey, get to high ground, there's a tsunami coming.
Oh, that's awesome.
So there's ways to not manipulate, but to coordinate so that you're not surprising everybody.
Is that like because of the towers? You kind of hit the towers?
Yeah, you're
with
hitting
the
the cell
message? I see,
towers.
I
So
see.
you're geolocating by cell towers. And so that's the way it is today. It's a lot better than it was back in 2018. See, that in 2018 there wasn't a way to practice. You could simulate
Yeah.
and not push the button, but pull up the system. Or you could verbally say, I'm going to now push the button that activate the information to say there's a missile alert coming. So, and that was part of the error of this whole scenario. But prior to July 13th, 2018, there had been, North Korea was involved in test firing missiles capabilities, getting better and better. They were still archaic at best and still learning. Their rocket fuel engines weren't quite they didn't perform to the high standard they wanted. And so there was a lot of internal issues, but they were getting there. They were getting better. They were getting their farther range. And they kept, saying that we're going to bomb Guam or we're going to bomb Hawaii or the West Coast and we could hit Alaska. And so they kept throwing all these things out there. And they were doing it for whatever political reason they were doing it.
Yeah.
Maybe to get oil and food and some other things for the country. And but you're an isolated organization and you treat everybody different than you're treating yourselves. And so you wonder why you're stuck in a box. But
Yeah.
that's their issue and they need to deal with that. And so with that, and then, oh, by the way, there's space debris that exits space and comes into the Earth's atmosphere. And then there's ways to track that space debris because it's not, we have radar systems all over that can track things. And so to keep it as I guess, unclassified as possible. But basically, so in order to protect the Hawaii state citizens, the discussion between myself, the administrator of Hawaii Emergency Management Agency, and the governor, and then with PACOM, USERPAC, and PACAF, and other organizations, we basically had a conversation. Do we have a duty to alert the public that if in the event that North Korea did fire this, within, I think, about 20 minutes, it's going to land. And so we should know about the last maybe 10 or 15 minutes where it's going to land. But we're not, it was archaic. I mean, it was better than archaic, but it wasn't, within a 2-meter accuracy.
Yeah.
So you can get a general, it's going to hit Oahu or it's going to hit Big Island or something like that. Or it's going to land between 10 miles north. And so because of the short span of time, do we have a duty to warn the American or the residents and visitors in Hawaii? And we all came to the agreement that yes, we do. Even though it's 10, 12, 15 minutes, we should at least let everybody know that an inbound missile is coming. And so that was the start of the genesis. And then so the team at HAIMA developed building blocks of training so that they could, practice and rehearse that if they got the call of the incoming, here's the steps they got to do to get the warning out. Whether that's hit the sirens, call people on the phone, use the EPAW system, and send the alert out. And so they drafted the message that would go out on the alert. They drafted a couple other things, and then they had the system. They figured out the system. They practiced with the system. But at the time, only one person had access outside of the state warning point that could alter the system. And my understanding, it wasn't that hard to alter the system to get into it. But anyway, it was for this particular day. It was a Saturday morning at 8 o'clock. everyone's out doing everything else but thinking there's an inbound missile.
I was sleeping.
Yeah, I was at a family support meeting with all the other leadership of the Guard and our spouses, and we're all sitting in a room at a table, and we just started the meeting. and I won't tell what I said when I saw the alert, but needless to say, I ran outside, started making phone calls. As soon as I called HIEMA, which was in the first 30 seconds, I knew it was false. I got to the governor, I let him know within about a minute and a half. And then my phone was going ape. I had Hawaiian Air was calling. Is it real? Is it not? Because we got planes in the air.
Yeah.
What do we do with all these planes? And so I was calling people that I know at various airlines. I called Paycom. I was trying to let everybody know that, hey, this is not. And then my deputy was trying to get a hold of the public affairs people so they could call the news media. Well, our go-to protocol was to call KGMB, or no, was the radio station, KSSK. That was our go-to, and then the news stations. And so KSSK only had one phone line. Well, they're on the phone line talking about the alert to somebody on the phone, so the phone's busy, so we can't get through.
Wow.
So we're trying to get in through back doors. Everybody's phones is going ape. It's just, we didn't have FirstNet back then. FirstNet would have thrown everybody off their phones except the emergency management. And so there wouldn't have been a problem as long as you have FirstNet accessibility. And so we didn't have that yet. We have it today, but we didn't have it then. And then, so that was the start of this. And you know, was it an exercise? Was it not an exercise? And so the individual that pushed the button, he believes that he didn't hear the first part, that it was an exercise. And so to his, you know, and I believe him. I don't see any reason why not, but he staunchly believes that to him, he didn't hear the first part, so it was real. And we may try to make scenarios as real as possible, so we're doing those kinds of things. But everybody else knew it was an exercise, and so then it was chaos from there.
I bet. I would have been sweating. Yeah. And then the whole thing about the Twitter account, which everyone kind of
so I don't see the importance. To me, Twitter wasn't the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, could I get on Twitter? Well, that's the governor's communications department. That's his people got to get out and help. And everybody was trying. It just the systems were overwhelmed. So you talk about, I mean, it's unfortunate it happened. And fortunately, nobody got killed. Mm-hmm. Now, there were people doing some weird and odd things, and there were people that were not happy at all, and they kissed their loved ones goodbye, thinking they were going to die. And you know, I've apologized immensely for all of that, and if I could change it, I would. And so I that's an unfortunate incident. But since then, the FCC, FEMA, I mean, the governor and I went to meetings up in Washington, D.C. with the Pentagon, with the White House staff, with you name it. We went DHS, FEMA, we met everybody, DOD staff, and we discussed what happened. We explained it, and we provided recommendations. And to my knowledge, they've accepted. They figured out their own recommendations. They developed their own. They took some of ours, and so the whole system has changed today, where those kinds of things, I'm not saying it won't happen, because it happened in Japan. They did the same thing by accident.
Yeah.
And it happened in another country. They did the same thing we did. And so it's not impossible. And then HPD did it 2 years later in their dispatch. They set off the sirens, not the IPOS system, but they set off the sirens. Everybody thought there was something happening. And I was on the phone with the chief or deputy chief almost immediately, because I'm sitting at home on a couch hearing the sirens going, buddy, what's going on? And he's like, oh, oops, somebody hit the button. I said, get on the TV. That's what I did wrong. I should have gone straight to the TV station. But, you know, you got to get the word out.
Well, I think that's one thing that a lot of people don't realize either, is that the news media and even the radio stations, they were on a line with people talking about, but it wasn't the people that they needed to be hearing from.
Exactly.
And you just could not get through. So when people were saying, oh, it took however many minutes and whatever, it's like, well, it could have taken like 2, maybe, but, you know.
Well, from what I was told by my people, my public affairs and we got the message to the TV station through back channels and through KSSK within 12 minutes. Now, what they did with the information and how they got it out, it took a little bit longer. And it started to trickle out before so everybody counts the 38 minutes from the time they got the initial phone message to the time they got the false alert message or cancel message. That was 38 minutes. But prior to that, the TV stations were already reporting false alarm.
Yeah. But see, again, it kind of goes back to like the perception. But people, they're just so worried about this incident and people putting kids in drainage ditches that that they're not even looking at the report that it's false news.
Yeah. And you know, I think of the media as your friend. They're there. They can help you get information out in a positive light 99% of the time. But when something goes wrong, you know, you kind of feel like you're outside the norm and they're not so friendly anymore.
Yeah.
But they are. They're just doing their job, trying to find the facts, and they think the public wants to know, and the public does want to know more.
Yeah, of course.
So they're trying to help answer the public's questions.
Yeah.
And thinking for them. They could do it a little bit nicer sometimes. But be that as it may, you know, I don't wish that upon anybody. But experience-wise, I mean, I forget exactly how many conference meetings, media briefings, state legislature, federal meetings the governor and I were at that just, you know, we explained this over and over and over again. And really there wasn't much new information given out, but we did our fair share of explaining.
People just wanted to hear it in person. Yeah.
And I thank the news for being up there to at least get the information out. So the public knew that we were doing something about it. We weren't just going, oh, my bad, big mistake, see you later, everybody go back to work. We didn't do that. We explained everything. We apologized. You know, we made sure we took steps to ensure that it will never happen again. When never is a bad word. You can never say never because it's human beings. We're all human. We make mistakes. It's just that simple.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if they got that system in place where they can block out other cell phones and just have their own one way, well, I mean, they live and learn, I guess, right?
Right. And I think even either FEMA regionally or nationally or FCC can monitor the system, and if something goes out that's wrong, they can help correct it immediately. So there's a lot of things that have gone right since then that they put into place by lessons learned to ensure that the likelihood of it happening again, either one is close to zero, or it can be corrected immediately.
Nice.
So Hawaii. Not the thing you want to be thankful for, but it turned out it works better for everyone in the end.
Are we the only state that has that kind of alert?
No. Everybody has. All the states and territories have.
Oh yeah, I guess because the tornadoes and all that too.
Yeah, it's an emergency management piece.
See.
Yeah.
I was thinking more on just the missile, like is Montana?
Well,
do they have a missile
you'd be
alert?
surprised how many. So I couldn't go. There was a conference going on with all the tags, and I had to stay back. And rightfully so, and stay in the islands and help fix this situation. And whether that meant briefing, you know, various people and all the organizations, then so be it. So I did a lot of conference calls with the tags up and all of them were like, how did it happen? How do we make sure it doesn't happen in my state?
Yeah.
So I put together presentations. Here's what happened. Here's what we did. Here's the corrections we made. And so everybody went, oh, thank you.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. Well, at least they reached out. Right. They said, I don't want to make that mistake. Well, and then you go from that position
to retired.
Yeah. So, when did you retire?
So I retired as the Adjutant General, the state position, on December 30th, 2019. So exactly almost 5 years to the day.
Wow.
And then I retired militarily January 3rd. And technically January 4th, I was retired from 2020 from the military after 41 years, 6 months and 5 days.
Oh, wow. Yeah. What was that like? Were you like ready, or were you still kind of like...
I knew in October that I was going to retire. And I had asked the governor before, as you know, because after 4 years, my wife was like, okay, you gave it 4 years. Normally, you do 2 terms with the governor, you do 8. But there's no written rule that you have to. And my wife was like, I don't see you. You're gone 4 or 5 months out of the year. You're traveling all over. You're going to meetings. You come home dead tired. You leave at dark. You come home at dark. I just want my husband back. And so, and as you got to balance your life, right? And so, and then you got drill weekends. So you're home maybe 2 weekends out of the year, out of the month. And then I'm home maybe 2 weeks out of the month. And so I'm gone all over the place because you got soldiers and airmen everywhere around the world, and you have to go visit them. And I have countries that are, like Philippines and Indonesia. We have a relationship with Taiwan, and I was the only guy in uniform that got to meet the president of Taiwan. Got a picture with her.
Oh wow!
That just took off on Taiwan like crazy. Gave her, But these are relationships you be as a general. You get to meet all these people, and it's amazing and it's fun and it's enjoyable, and these are fantastic people out there. And so we have a state relationship with Indonesia. We have a relationship with the Philippines. We do training requirements with Singapore and their armed forces. And then we were developing this relationship with Taiwan, or further developed because PACOM had a relationship for a long time. We were just trying to help get it established. And we were using emergency management more so. So I could go to Taiwan, not as a 2-star general, but as the director of emergency management as my state civilian position, and be there, and they'd call me Mr. Logan, although they didn't. They called me General, but be that as it may. But I went there as a civilian, as a state employee, and I wore civilian clothes. And so these are the relationships you build, and so you aspire those, you keep those going, and those are all the fun parts of being the lead. And then so I'm traveling all over the West. I'm traveling all over the United States. I'm traveling in Europe where my soldiers are and airmen are. And so after 4.5, 5 years, it takes a toll on you.
Yeah.
And so, my wife and I had a long discussion. I was like, okay, the governor's office came and said, hey, would you like to retire at the end of this year? And I said, sure, I will. And so I did. And then took a year off. Well, unfortunately, COVID hit, so the timing was actually perfect. I got out before the chaos started with COVID.
Oh, man.
But I missed it every day. I missed the people that just like when I left the police department. I missed all my beat partners, all my friends that I had made. Granted, I might not have liked certain things about the HPD, about the pay really, but generally HPD was good. But back then, we weren't making a lot of money as policemen, and so I missed all that. And then again, now I'm retiring after 40 years of being in an Army uniform, and the state employee is 5 years is that. But that wasn't the whole. It was about being the tag, being in command and control of large organizations, and then to give all that up to retire, but fulfilled. I mean, I'm the 19th Adjutant General over a 120-year span. That means there weren't a lot of people in between, right? So only a few people ever get to be the Adjutant General. I never thought I was going to be that. It wasn't my aspiration. I would have liked to have been, I was happy being a colonel, a battalion commander, and a colonel. That to me was golden, because my dad was that. And I thought, well, that's all, that to me that's life. And then, when you get there, you go, well, I think I could be that. I got the potential to do that, and I got the potential. So then you start thinking about all those other things you can be or could be if the opportunities presented itself. And so one of the things I used to espouse to all my soldiers and airmen, young and old, was always be prepared for promotion. Get every schooling you have to get to, go to it.
Yep.
If you need another school, go to that one. Get the experience, go over there in that unit or this unit, or come up to the headquarters or go onto the joint staff. Get that experience so that when somebody says, hey, would you like to be the Adjutant General? For you, it's an easy say, yes, absolutely. I'm well prepared for this. And it's not, well, no, maybe I'm not ready yet because I haven't done a lot of things. Well, whose fault is that?
Yeah.
Right? So I made sure that I was always prepared. I never pushed anybody out of the way. I always waited my turn, but I always made sure, hey, is that school open? Is anybody going? If not, I'd like to go. I'll go. So I made myself prepared for it. So when the opportunity presented itself, and I applied for the position and the governor appointed me, I was ready. And so everyone has to meet that. And so I espouse that to all the young kids. If I was the chief of HPD today, that would be the first thing out of my mouth. To every officer at every rank, every sergeant, every supervisor, hey, I'm here to help you to be the best that you need to be. What can I do to help you? Mm-hmm. And then, oh, by the way, here's your responsibility. You need to make sure that you're skilled. You need to know your job better than everybody else. You need to be prepared for when that promotion happens, and you better be ready for it. You better be able to answer all these questions, and be prepared for interviews. So you got to be able to interview.
Yeah, and even like with even the things with the education, I think, because in the military you can take college courses, tuition assistance. I think HPD might have something similar to that too.
I've talked to other officers that came in a little after me. There were certain programs that allowed you to go to school, and I think they still have it today, where the city and county, the police department will help pay for people. Now, I did it all myself. I paid for my own. There was no program when I was there, or if there was, I didn't know about it. So I split my days off, Tuesday and Thursday, and those are my days to go to school. So I made all my classes for Tuesday and Thursday, and I buckled down, trying to raise a family, trying to do all the things I needed to do, go to work and still go to school because I had to. It was no longer, you can, shoulda, coulda, woulda, as I had to. If I wanted to continue in the Army National Guard and be a captain, move all the way up to being a general someday, I needed to finish school. Yeah. So you do what you got to do when you need to.
Yeah, I wish, admittedly, when I was in the Army, I didn't have that outlook. I was just kind of like, I'm just here. But I do kind of, always looking back, I always wish I would have taken up. It wasn't until right when I was getting out of active duty, I started taking college courses. Right. And when I started taking them on campus from HPU, because I'm also a HPU alumni, right. I was like, man, I should have been doing this. It's 2 hours every Saturday, 2 or 3 hours every Saturday. Could bang out like 2 classes. Right. And advance myself, because it all goes towards promotion points and things like that. Even like with a civilian police department, you can take everything online nowadays, a criminal justice degree or anything. Because if you want to be like a detective or an investigator, you need a degree to move over into those things. Now I'm not sure. But
not in the department. You just need a high school diploma to get into the police department.
I just mean like as like a
detective. To get promoted. It helps you.
Yeah.
It doesn't hurt you. But to be a detective in HPD, you got to make sergeant. So to get promoted to sergeant, and when I was there, was 5 years minimum time and grade, unless you had a college degree, then you could take the test in 3 years. But you had to wait for the next cycle of tests to come, take the test, and then you work on it. So it's got its rhythm, and then you have to make sure that you fit that rhythm as it goes.
Yeah, because they want you to have the footwork, yeah?
Right.
Yeah. I used to want to do, because I used to train with HPD's SSD.
Right.
When I was what we call SRT, Special Reaction Team, up on Schofield. So it's our equivalent of a SWAT team. And we used to train with SSD, and those guys are awesome. And when I had originally wanted to do that HPD, do my time as a regular patrol, and then try out for their SSD, I mean, those guys are super fit.
Yes, they are.
I used to love training with them. They would always fly in a helicopter and air assault out, hit their little training building, and quick too. I loved it. But just unfortunately, I ended up not pursuing. I got involved in politics,
right.
So I kind of got lazy. I say
it's a big different path. So, in life we always, and I've told this to my college students. I was actually going to write a speech, and I never finished it, but. You come to crossroads, and so you either take the left road or the right road. And I don't mean right by as correct road, it's just left and right. And so you take a path. And what you need to make sure is you just stay on that path. Now, it may be the wrong path for you in your life, in what you think your life is going, but you stay on it for a while until another fork comes, and then you make the decision. Am I wrong or am I right? And if I'm wrong, then I'm going to take this path. If I'm doing okay and things are going well, but if you start looking back to every crossroad you came to and you go, I shoulda, coulda, woulda.
Yeah.
Well, that's just wasting your time. So you just move forward. Doesn't mean forget it, because you made decisions there, and those decisions are extremely important later on in life, and you won't know until you hit them, and then you'll realize, that's why I hit that road, and that's the direction I went. And I went there this way, because if I went that way, you know, I look back at all the decisions I made, and not knowing if I was doing the right thing or not, but it just felt the right thing. I stayed in that path, and I went from a private to 2-star general.
Yeah, that's
And
awesome.
if I had taken any of those other paths, I'm not so sure that would have happened. And so they are the right path. It takes time for it to develop and see. And so, like I say, yeah, don't ever forget about those, but don't ponder either. Just think about it and keep moving. Focus on forward,
Yeah,
present and forward, because that's where you need to be.
I like that. You should finish that speech and write it up, and then you can pass it to your.
Well,
your
if I ever
students.
do another HPU commencement ceremony speech, I'll start with that one.
Yeah, that's a good one though. I like that. Well, and then I guess we can kind of close it out because I don't want to take up too much of your time. We're going on like 2 hours, 23 minutes. I enjoyed the conversation.
Oh, it was great.
I could talk to you probably for like all day. But
Yeah, there's probably a lot of things we left out that could have talked about.
is there anything that you wanted to tap onto?
No, I had a great opportunity, a great career. I mean, I joined the military. I never had a plan to join the military, and I didn't want to be active duty because my dad was active duty. And it's not that I didn't like active duty. I just didn't want to travel 3 months.
Yeah.
I mean, 3 years, every 3 years, get up and move, get up and move, get up and move. I lived through that. It was very hard to make friends. And everywhere you got through, which is, I think, to me, is why I am the way I am today. Throw me in anything, it's okay, because I'll figure it out. Because that's the way I was. Every time I went from this school cross country to that school, plop. And so military dependent kids that grew up that way, we're kind of all similar in that aspect where we kind of got used to that. And so we got that ability to just, I don't want to fret with it. Just throw me there. I'm good. I'm going. I'm going to execute. Because we had to. That's what we were kids. We had no say. I mean, at 6 years old, tell my parents I'm not going. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, you
Maybe
cannot.
at 17 in high school might have had a little more impact, but not at my age. And so I got here when I was 12. So I have no like I said, no aspiration to be in the military. It was by fluke that a friend came by and asked me to take him to the recruiter's office because he had already joined, and that was the start of my career. And I thank him. The last time I saw him, he's here in Waikiki somewhere, and we ran into each other by accident, and I told him thank you, and he's like, why? I said, if it wasn't for you, I would have never joined the military, or I might have joined it much later in life. And I wouldn't have been where I am today. And so I want to thank you for that, because you're the reason that I went to that in the first place. And that was this Hawaiian Chinese, one of the sons of this family that hanai'd us when we first moved here and opened their doors of their house to us anytime we wanted to come by. No matter what time of day, night, didn't matter. If you needed to come by and you need a place to sleep, our house is open to you. And so just what a wonderful, the Hawaiian people here are just, they give their hearts out to everyone here. They're so warm and caring for people. And so to me, living here for it's 49 years now, be 50 next March. And so, but I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. I don't mind visiting, but I wouldn't want to live anywhere else.
And I can echo those sentiments. Like, I know people who live in Hawaii that really don't have like local friends. They kind of just stay Waikiki, Honolulu. But for me, Hawaii, I've had Hawaiians bring me in the Hanai sense, like you said, and it's just those people and that feeling you get, and the welcomeness, and the true friendship.
Exactly.
Is what really makes me want to stay, because I don't know, I've been other places and you just can't find that same sentiment. So
a lot of people out there claim to be your friends, but when the difficult parts are happening in your life and they're not around, is that truly your friend?
Right. No. Awesome. Well, I really appreciated your time.
Thank you for the opportunity. Really appreciate it.
I would like to do it again whenever you're ready. Maybe in a couple.
Maybe we can talk about a lot of police stuff next time, and leave the military for.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I appreciate it, and we'll have to get together and do it again.
Thank you, James, for the opportunity.
Thanks.
Greatly appreciate it.
Thanks. Have a good day.
You too.